My name is Beth, and I use she/her pronouns. I'm a graduate student, and I'm also a violence prevention educator here at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. And today we have some wonderful folks from the Christine Ann Domestic Abuse Center with us today. So we are going to just have a really great conversation about their work and what everybody does there and the impacts that they have in our community. So we're just going to start with introductions. If you all want to just give your name and your pronouns if you feel comfortable, how long you've been with the agency, and then if you would like to tell us a little bit about your educational background. And I just am going to ask the questions, and you guys can kind of just go in order how you feel.
I am Olivia. I am an empowerment advocate with Christine Ann Domestic Abuse Services. So I work with the adults who aren't presently staying in our shelter and provide support to them. I use she/her pronouns. I've been with Christine Ann for just shy of 5 years, always in the same role. And I'm a graduate of UW-Oshkosh. I went to school for human services leadership there, and I minored in social justice.
Welcome, Olivia. Thank you.
I guess I'll go. My name is Lexi. I'm also an empowerment advocate. My job is essentially the same thing as Olivia. I use she/her pronouns. And my education, I'm a graduate of the University of Stevens Point. And I double majored in social work and sociology, and I have a minor in women's and gender studies.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lexi. Welcome.
I can go. My name is Shauna. Pronouns she, they, anything said in respect. I've been at Christine Ann also just shy of 5 years. And I'm a youth advocate, youth and prevention advocate. So I get to work with kids who've been impacted by domestic abuse in some capacity. And I graduated from UW-Oshkosh in special education, and I just took a different route. So still teaching, but in a different way. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Shauna. Welcome.
And my name is Alicia Gehrig. I am the development manager at Christine Ann. My pronouns are she, her, and I have been with the organization for a little over 5 years.
Alicia, did you want to tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Oh, yes, of course. I forgot about that part. Yeah, I graduated from UW-Oshkosh with a bachelor's in human services leadership. And my minor is in social justice with an emphasis on prejudice and discrimination.
Awesome. Thank you. And also welcome. I think first we will talk a little bit about if you want to go into a little bit more detail about your role, what your role is at Christine Ann, and maybe share some examples of like what your job duties are. Whoever wants to go first can.
I'll take it for the team there, Liv. As I stated before, Olivia and I share the same role. Olivia is technically based out of Menasha. So here at Christine Ann, we do have 3 different locations. We have one in Oshkosh, that's our main hub, if you will. And then we are down in Menasha at the Levin Community Resource Building. And then we also work out of Green Lake, Wisconsin, in their town square. So we kind of bounce between all 3 of those offices. Technically, Liv is the Fox City's resource advocate, if you will. But, collectively, the two of us do bounce between all three offices. Essentially, what our job is we work with adult survivors who are not currently staying in shelter. Adults that have experienced some form of domestic abuse or dating violence along the lines of that. Essentially, our jobs are just to walk alongside them in their journey. We never force a person to do something. We only kind of educate them on their different options. We're here to educate on the different dynamics of unhealthy relationships. We get our clients connected to different community resources, and we provide a lot of emotional support as well. I don't know, Liv, you probably have more to add on to that.
No, I thought that pretty much encompasses it. We are multi-site advocates, so we go where we're needed, when we're needed. In addition to that, we provide some basic level legal advocacy. So assisting survivors who are interested in filing for what's known as a restraining order in the state of Wisconsin. We do minimal court accompaniment as well. And then there's a third member to our specific team who provides full-time legal advocacy. So anything kind of above and beyond what we've previously mentioned.
So then, if you work outside of shelter, then are folks referred to you, or are they do they just come in on their own, or how do your clients get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oftentimes folks who are calling Christine and are unsure of kind of what they want to do, maybe just know that we might be a resource for them, get connected with us. So folks might start working with an advocate like Lexi or myself and then decide that they're ready to come into shelter. Or it could work the opposite way. Folks who have previously stayed in shelter and want some additional support might work with us. And then we kind of catch all of those either self or community referrals. So individuals who just are reaching out for help on their own and aren't currently seeking shelter, but want to work with an advocate to kind of understand their situation, create a safety plan, just get some support or encouragement. Or, similarly, if someone has been referred to us by another service provider, friend or family member, they might just sit down and meet with us as well. So referrals come all over, and individuals do self-refer to us as well.
Thank you. That's awesome. Because I think sometimes if you're not super familiar with how, your type of organization works, folks might think that that's their decision day, that they have to go take
Sure.
everything and go right into shelter at that point. So that's wonderful that you're kind of there to help them just decide what they would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Shauna, tell us a little bit more about what your role is.
Sure, thank you. So like I said, I'm a youth advocate and I get to work with many survivors. So kids who've been impacted by domestic abuse in some capacity, whether they're secondary victims having witnessed an event, or if however they've been impacted, we're here for them. So work with kids ages 4 to 19. So it could be kids who've witnessed things at home or also now who are in abusive dating relationships. And we really meet kids where they're at. So we go into their schools with parent permission. And we get to sit down with them, talk with them about safety planning. So how to stay safe at home, how to stay safe in that relationship, really building self-esteem, teaching healthy relationships, highlighting red flags, and also teaching those healthy coping skills too. So they know what to do in case they are witnessing an abusive event, how to keep themselves safe. And again, we just really meet them where they're at and serve as a safe support person. So I have a team of 3 advocates, myself and 2 others, and that's our main focus, is that one-on-one support. We also do small groups about healthy relationships, since relationships are something that it's really tricky and it's not typically explicitly taught in school. So we get an opportunity to partner with the school counselors and teach boundaries and what's okay, what's not okay, what's important to you in a relationship, and we also have presentations then too, so a more wide scale audience about those healthy relationships too.
That's awesome. I suppose that is not only are you there to help support those kiddos, but also to kind of educate on and hopefully preventing any kind of cycle of violence that could possibly occur.
Exactly that. We want to prevent the cycle from continuing. When kids have witnessed abuse, they oftentimes think that that's okay. And we're here to tell them, again, what's okay, what's not okay, and ensure like that they know that's not their fault. And that does not have to be their future either. So thank you for adding that piece. We are definitely here to stop that cycle from continuing.
Amazing. Alicia, you kind of play a different role. What can you talk to us about what your job entails?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not necessarily an advocate in the same way that these three are, but instead a huge chunk of my job is to go into the community and educate our community on what is domestic abuse, how they can help support survivors in their lives, and just overall how to make our community a better and safer environment for everyone who's living here. And so that's a huge piece of my job, is to go out into the community and provide these trainings and presentations, make people more aware of what it is that we do. But another part of my job, so I'm part of the development team, and we're responsible for the financial aspect of the agency. So we are a nonprofit. We have a $1.25 million budget that we need to meet each year. So the development team is responsible for finding that funding through special events or fundraisers that we put on, connecting with donors in the community, applying for grants, whether that is local grants or government grants. So that is what my role is and what the development team does.
So it sounds like you all have similar educational backgrounds, but yet you have like a whole variety of jobs that you do. So we can I think safely say that you don't necessarily have to be pigeonholed into one thing after you graduate. All right, why don't we talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that you all have in your line of work, barriers, different things like that. And maybe Lexi, did you want to start?
Sure. So I guess me personally, in the work that I do with my clients, a lot of the biggest hurdles we have are, connection to resources. Right now, housing is not good. So we have a handful of clients that are, actively looking for housing and maybe don't have a place that they're living right now, or living out of their cars. And, unfortunately, housing just isn't where it needs to be right now, which I'm sure everybody is kind of aware of that housing crisis that's going on right now. So definitely community resources are really hard. Transitional housing isn't a thing here. There is maybe one transitional housing program I can list off, and it's not even based out of this county. So definitely like resource connections can be a hurdle if you don't know exactly, what you're looking for. We do work with a handful of community agencies that are in this area. But again, there are still those gaps in services. With the COVID pandemic that's going on, we have seen a huge increase of phone calls coming into our agency, police reporting. We've personally, Olivia and I talk about it all the time, the physical violence that our clients are experiencing can be considered extreme compared to what we've seen in the past. So, the COVID pandemic is definitely a really big barrier effect on our work, and having to kind of be creative in our safety planning and can again resource referral and financial assistance, all of that good stuff. So those two things are probably the biggest things right now that we're dealing with. I don't know, and then all of the fun legal stuff that we also have to deal with. I don't know, Liv, you have more to comment on that?
I think you covered it very well. I think to Lexi's final point there, just the thing to keep in mind when you're working with a survivor of a unhealthy relationship who might also be a victim of a crime, the criminal justice process is not at all timely. And so sometimes that just can be something that feels overwhelming for our survivors and can be a huge barrier for them, just kind of navigating something that takes so long. Before I did this work, I don't think I understood the magnitude of the criminal justice process, all the pieces and players involved, nor did I understand the amount of time it would take to walk with someone through that. So that'd be my answer.
Shauna, what are some of the challenges that you face when you're working with the youth?
It can be hard working with kids sometimes, especially the younger ones, because I think about this often. When adults come for services, they're at a place where they're aware that they're ready to talk about it to some extent. And like I said before, we meet kids where they're at and we come into their schools and we open that conversation. So oftentimes kids aren't ready to talk about it. Kids don't want to see one of their parents as unsafe or abusive, oftentimes. So a barrier is when they're not ready, it can take a really long time to get there. And I just remind my team all the time, it's all about planting seeds. And we do see them sprout, we really do. And we also know that just being there, just showing up is really important and builds resilience by being a safe person in their life. So that can be a barrier. I also see things in my clientele oftentimes like truancy. There's a lot going on at home and they sometimes don't want to worry about school. It's the last thing on their mind often, especially if there's an added layer of the housing crisis like Lexi talked about. School is not high on the priority list sometimes. So it makes it hard to get to them. It makes it hard to reach them when they're not at the place where we meet them. And then COVID also that was a challenge. When schools went virtual, we also went virtual with the kids, which is really hard when you're talking about like a 4-year-old. There's only so many activities that you can do to engage them. But again, we reminded ourselves just checking in and being there and showing up was important during that time. So COVID was definitely a struggle and still is. It's still present, it's still here. But this year is really a relief. We're able to go back into the schools again and meet with kids right there. So that part is better. So those are the big barriers that I can think of.
Alicia, would you say that in your role that you have different barriers and challenges that your job faces?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest barriers that I face is this is not necessarily an easy topic to talk about, and getting people to be open to learning more sometimes is a challenge in itself, just because it is such like a daunting subject and there's a lot to it. But I think a huge piece in what I encounter is so many individuals out in the community just don't have a full understanding of what domestic abuse truly is, and often have the misconception that it is only physical violence, and anything beyond that spectrum really just is not, excuse me, anything beyond that spectrum really just is not even in the thought of being domestic abuse. So a lot of it is just trying to educate people that it is so much more than just the physical violence, right? There's technological abuse, there's financial abuse, there is psychological abuse, emotional abuse, so many different elements and tactics that are used in an unhealthy or in an abusive relationship. And so that's definitely a piece in, trying to get people to be open-minded and willing to learn outside of the like, nope, it's this, and have like a very clear cut of like what a typical victim looks like and what domestic abuse is, when really there is no such thing as a typical victim. And so a lot of it is in that education piece. But we are grateful for the businesses and the organizations that have welcomed us, and we're going to continue to try and get into more and more so that, we're setting our community up to be safe people and ultimately just a safer place. But also there's funding barriers and challenges as well. During COVID, we actually saw an increase in funding, in people saying like, we want to help however we can, which is wonderful. In that, a lot of our grants that we apply for have like very specific restrictions, like this can only be used for youth, or this can only be used for legal. A lot of our grants during COVID time said, forget the restrictions, use the funds however you may need, which is incredible. But as most people are seeing within the community, there is now some funding barriers. There are restaurants that are seeing the effects of domestic abuse, or not domestic abuse, excuse me, of COVID. There are a lot of different elements and places that are being now affected by COVID and funding wise. And that's also a challenge that we're seeing come up very recently now in this year in 2021.
Yeah, it's amazing about how far reaching the effects of the pandemic really went. And I don't even know if we'll really know the full effects, for years to come, really. Let's switch gears a little bit, and I would love to have you all share like the fun part, the joys, like what do you love about your job?
I love everything about my job. I know that sounds cliche, but I think my favorite thing to provide as an answer when asked this question really is watching someone reclaim their life. So, working in the anti-violence movement, understanding domestic abuse as more than physical violence, we understand it to be a pattern of abusive behavior designed to gain or maintain a sense of power and control over another person. And when you've survived power and control or coercive control on an ongoing basis, what that behavior is designed to do is kind of erode away at your self-worth, your sense of self, your ability to make your own decisions or confidence in those decisions that are being made. And so a lot of times, I'm working with someone who doesn't see their own potential, right? Because that abusive person has done everything and anything they can to kind of strip that away. So watching people reclaim their sense of self and make their own decisions, big or little, is a huge part of why I love what I do. I always kind of think about it like, when I meet somebody, even for the first time, they're talking to me and they're talking about what they've lived through, right? And I'm listening to that and I'm providing appropriate support for that. But I'm also kind of envisioning what their future could look like. And I tell them all the time that I can kind of hold the hope for what that might look like while someone else maybe can't. And so watching people catch glimmers or, basically take the hope torch from me and hold it on their own is my favorite part of my job.
That's awesome. Thank goodness that they have you.
I'm glad I have her too. She's my supervisor. So, so kind of piggybacking off of Liv, while I agree everything with her, I'll kind of, put my own little flair on it. So my favorite thing about my job is when my clients self-identify their success. So, I think that, I come from a social work background. So, we have our goals that we have to set. We have our, our levels that we need to get to, whatever. I'm not a practicing social worker, obviously. But so we come into that with, okay, once you hit these goals, that's your success. You can get your kid back. You can, whatever that looks like for, that specific individual. For us, we don't really have expectations on our clients. We just expect them to survive, basically, which kind of sounds bad. So when we have a client that comes in and is like, hey, I made that phone call that I was supposed to make a month ago and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to. And now I have an appointment set up for next week. That's what brings a smile. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to empower our clients to be able to, make those decisions or follow through on whatever it is. And, sometimes it's as little as, I got out of bed this morning and I showered and I made it to the appointment. Yeah, I was 5 minutes late, but I made it and I didn't want to get out of bed. That's a small success. So, we don't set expectations for our clients, but, when a client self-identifies that they're proud of themselves or that they've accomplished something that they've been wanting to do for a while, that's what makes my heart warm. So.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Shauna, what would you like to share?
Well, I love about my position, similar to what Lexi said, like we don't have a set plan. We don't have to do XYZ, meet certain outcomes by a certain date. We have slow, thorough progress and we meet kids where they're at. So a lot of times, youth advocates, we serve as just a light in the kid's life, a safe space to be. And that brings me a lot of joy, seeing a kid be excited to meet with a youth advocate. They may not want to talk about these heavy topics, but we get there, and to see them grow. And also, like Lexi said, when they start to see their worth and realize that what's happening is not their fault. I recently had a client say to me, I know my worth. And they said, I'm ready. I said, what are you ready for? They said, I'm ready to run toward my future instead of stand in my grave. And they meant that. And I see that. And I've seen that in them all along. They have this bright future and they can get there and they deserve respect and they deserve to treat themselves with that respect too. So to see someone grow that much and start to believe in themselves and to know that they have a bright future, which really is very rewarding. Yes, and it makes me very proud of the clients too. They're really growing a lot. The seeds are sprouting.
Can I add something to that? So, when a client doesn't need us anymore, that's awesome too. Nobody should have to come see us. Our job shouldn't exist, but unfortunately in our day and age, it does. So when it's like one time Shauna was like, all right, I don't think these clients need to come meet with me. They know everything. They can tell me everything. I really don't need to meet with these kids anymore. And I was like, I don't need to meet with the parent anymore either because they're doing awesome. When our clients no longer really need us for, whatever, we're always here. Liv likes to say time never makes us a stranger. And which is true. We see people at all different stages in their healing journey or their journey in general. So, when it comes to the, and when a client is like, I don't, can I just let you know the next time I need to talk to you when we've been meeting on a consistent basis, that's really awesome too.
That is so good. Alicia, would you like to talk about some of the things that you love?
Sure. I'll start out just by saying I love October. I think that this month is incredibly important. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And a big part of my job is helping planning the events and fundraisers that we put on for our organization, which I love to do. I really enjoy the impacts that these events make and the education that's surrounding these events and fundraisers that we put on. Another piece of my job that I love so much is those light bulb moments. So when I am doing a presentation or a training out in the community, and I say something and you can physically see a light bulb come on in a person as I'm talking, because it's something that they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Or the alternative of, oh my gosh, I know somebody who is impacted by this. I love those moments because it's just one step closer to being a safe person and knowing how to navigate those situations when they arise in your own life, but also when they arise in the friends or family members in your lives as well. And I love so many things about this job and being here. And but one of the main things that I love is the team that we work with too. We have the most compassionate people that I've ever met in my entire life that work for this agency. And although I don't get to do direct client work, I love being able to relay the things and the successes that that these three advocates and other advocates are experiencing too, because although the education piece is super important of like knowing what domestic abuse is, it's also super important to understand the successes and the wins that come from the work that we do. And so I love hearing those, and I love being able to relay those out to the community as well.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. I think that sometimes in your line of work, we can talk about like vicarious trauma and just having to be a witness and hear about some, pretty horrible things that can happen to people. I'm wondering if you all would like to just share about what you do to prevent that vicarious trauma on a personal level. Like, do you have certain self-care things that you like to employ to kind of mitigate that in your life?
I could speak to that. Well, on a professional level, I meet with my team Friday afternoons every week to just talk about the week and talk about our clients. So that way we can lay it all out there and try to leave it all there, come back Monday. So that's what I do on a professional level. It's just process things that are going on rather than hold on to them in our own heads. So that's very helpful. And then just personally, I like to get outside a lot, lean on my support people. It is very important to do because this is a line of work you could grow very cynical very fast. So just really highlighting the good that we see. Like Alicia said, this team is very pure-hearted people. So that's really important to reflect on too, is just remember, we've got a team, nobody's in it alone. So that's helpful for me, just personally, the team level, and then getting outside, doing things that I enjoy during the weekend and after work and such. We try to leave work at work, and we're also human. So I'm sure nobody can do that 100%.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think Shauna's statement rings true about the importance, and going off of what Alicia said too, the importance of a healthy, supportive team. At the end of the day, we're the only people that we can talk to about the things that we've heard throughout the week. And rather than that being a really isolating thing, I think and I've seen time and time again, becomes a really beautiful thing. The relationships that you make in the context of coworkers here at Christina, and I think are unlike co-working relationships you'll get anywhere else. And it's important to be able to kind of have your person or people in the building that you trust to kind of process through something. I think often about the objective, when I hear something that's hard, it's supposed to be hard to hear, right? Because it's domestic abuse. But it's about how I put that piece of information back out into the world, and I don't like internalize it or carry it with me. That's really important. So that's kind of my professional answer. On a personal level, I think the appropriate mental health support is important. If that's counseling, if that's therapy, if that's, you know, regular other forms of self-care, whatever works for you, I think is an important piece. But I don't think there should be any shame in that. I mean, caregivers need care too. So that's what works for me.
So I guess it's important to note that, you know, especially in our line of work, there's really no getting around the vicarious trauma. You know, we hear the things that we hear and it's hard, you know, it's just a matter of how we cope with it, you know, how we self-care or cope with it. So professionally, I'm a really big fan of going and sitting in my car when I really just need to get away from people or like relax after, you know, maybe a long or tough appointment. If I have a busy day of like appointment after appointment, I don't, you know, force myself to do other projects in between. You know, I take my time and I talk to my coworkers and unleash anything that I might need to unleash, or again, go sit in my car or run home and take a break. So I really try to take breaks when I can, as it's appropriate, professionally. And as far as on a personal level, again, the same thing as what Olivia said, professional mental health help is not anything to be ashamed of. So that's definitely something that I utilize, as well as, you know, just being active and going outside and utilizing my cats the way that they're supposed to be utilized, which literally everyone else can attest to. They all we're cat agencies. So utilizing our cats and, you know, just doing the things that I want to do that bring me joy. So that's what I try to do.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Shauna, what about you? You answered already, didn't you?
I did think of an additional thought though. For my job, I drive school to school to school throughout Green Lake and Winnebago County, and that's amazing. Sometimes I don't want to get in my car one more time, but sometimes I need to get in my car and just drive that half hour. If I'm driving the Green Lake School District, that's fine. That's nearly an hour drive. Sometimes I'll listen to the radio pretty loud, sometimes nothing at all. That's nice. It just creates an automatic space to process or distract. Either way, that's really helpful to me. But yes, Alicia, I believe it is your turn.
I was going to say, also make sure to use your paid time off if you have it. That's there for a reason, and it's there for us to be able to recharge.
Absolutely.
I love that Lexi just said that, because that's something that I struggle tremendously with, is taking my paid time off. So, so I think that what I experienced maybe is a little bit different in terms of the stress, and it's, you know, it's different from what these three are hearing every single day, multiple times a day. I'm not hearing those things. My stress comes from the busyness of the season, and I'm grateful to have coworkers that check in on me, to say like, "How you doing? Are you okay? Do we need to take a walk?" And so I think that those are incredibly helpful to me, because I get so caught up in all of my to-dos that I don't necessarily get a chance to take that time for myself. So I'm grateful for the people who work here, who check in on each other and make sure that we are doing okay. And that's a huge, very important piece. As an agency, we do have once a month, it's a day called Just For You Day. And so it is paid time off, a half day, where it's supposed to be utilized, where we take those 4 hours and we go and we do something for ourselves, whether that is any of the things that these three just mentioned, or just simply being at home and binge watching Netflix or whatever that looks like. my cats are also a huge piece in calming me down and just kind of shifting my focus. And then also my support system outside of here and hanging out with my social network and the people that I have in my life. And those relationships are super important to me. So maintaining those is something that I do for self-care and keeping a peace of mind. And mental health support too is very important and helps me a lot tremendously.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I always tell people that there's no shame in the therapy game. You just gotta, if there's just do it. It's amazing. If an individual wants to do something that's maybe not in a formal advocate role, like you all do, what are some things that we can do to like not only help support you, but help support maybe friends or family members that we think might be in a violent situation?
I think one of the biggest things that people can do is educate themselves. There are so many different resources available out there, and I think educating yourselves primarily on the effects and the impacts and the warning signs of domestic abuse is so important. Offering a presentation to your faith spaces, your service groups, your corporations you work for, those are great ways to get involved. There are different, like if people could donate financially or if they want to do a fundraiser for us, that's another way. But honestly, education is key, and utilize your resources that you have available too. We have a packet on our website called the Friends and Family Packet that helps people who really have people in their lives who are impacted by abuse, and they want to know how they can better support those individuals. We have a packet that can kind of help break that down, but we also have our 24-hour helpline, which is not just for the survivors themselves or the people who are living in that abusive environment, but it's also for the friends, the family members, the coworkers who want to best support or learn more. That's what that helpline is for. So that's my piece on that. But
I think Alicia mentioned an important document that we created. It's called the Friends and Family Packet. And that's a really helpful tool, I think, really for anyone to use, because the national tagline this year theme is everyone knows someone. And that's a really true thing. Like, domestic violence impacts all individuals regardless of age, race, gender, socioeconomic background, etc. Right? Like, in a world that discriminates, domestic violence doesn't. So we all truly know someone. So having reviewed that document, right, it is important, because you don't know at what point someone in your life is going to make a disclosure to you, and it's really important to be well prepared in that moment. I think if you're somebody who's listening today or in the future, and you already know somebody, right, like you're already aware of that abuse going on in the life of a loved one, staying as non-judgmental and supportive of them as a person as you possibly can is, I think, like the most helpful thing you can do. You're not there to solve, I mean, this is a crash course on the packet, okay, but you're not there to solve the problem. You're not there to physically stop the domestic violence. You're there for your friend, your loved one, your sibling, whatever. Isolation is a huge piece of domestic abuse. It's the #1 power and control tactic that someone's going to attempt to utilize. And so the concept behind that is, abusive behavior thrives in isolation, behind closed doors, when people don't know what's going on. And so unhealthy people want to keep you away from places, persons, or things that you might gather strength or support from. So if you are knowing and loving somebody experiencing an abusive relationship, stay in contact with them and just ask them how they are, and let them really take the lead and remind them that you're there for them, whatever that looks like, and really ask them like what you can do. tell them what you see. Like, I see that this is kind of, you know, concerning, and here's why it concerns me, but I just want you to know I'm here to help you. How can I best help you? Those are like easy phrases, but they mean the most to survivors when you truly mean what you say.
I'm wondering if maybe someone could put your website info in the chat in case anybody wants to access that right away. And then also to everybody listening, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to either raise your hand or put them in the chat, and I'm sure they would be happy to answer them. I'm wondering, I think Lexi, it was you who brought up about a safety plan. Could you talk a little bit more about what exactly that is?
Yeah, of course. So when we're talking about a safety plan, it's just a foundational tool that we use with our clients to help them stay safe. And we try to really focus on both physical safety and mental safety. So when we're going through a safety plan, you know, like a basic safety plan with a client, we, you know, ask them, okay, so who do you have in your life that's supportive and safe? That, you know, we can write down their phone number and you can quick access that if you need to, that's aware of the situation that you could go over, you know, if, you know, tensions are high at home. Making sure that they understand that shelter is always a safe option if they're in an unhealthy or unsafe environment as well. Talking about, you know, ways to cope with what's going on at home. And, you know, we just recently redid our safety plan. You know, what about your personality is going to help you through this? You know, your strength, your resilience, whatever that looks like for our individual clients. And then finally, always knowing that, you know, if something bad does go down at home, you know, reach out to Liv or Olivia or I or whoever, you know, they're working with, our clients are working with, so that we can process and go over what's going on so that, you know, they're not just ruminating on it and it's getting worse. You know, we want to be there to support our clients mentally, as well as making sure that we're trying to stay safe. You know, a lot of the things that we say, more suggestions for a safety plan is, you know, not locking or not going into a room of the house that's going to have a lot of things that could be used against you as a weapon, such as, you know, obviously knives or pots and pans, you know, getting locked into a bathroom and you can't escape because, you know, they're standing in front of you, you know, thinking of small little things like that. As well as, you know, if we're working with someone who has an escalating situation at home and we know, you know, hey, at one point you might just need to run or go to mom's or go to your friend's house or whatever, you know, having a bag already packed of, you know, the basic necessities that you might need, you know, a couple pairs of clothes, your important legal documents, chargers, medications, all of that good stuff, just to make sure that, you know, you can grab and go kind of thing. So that's kind of what we talk about when we do a safety plan. As Shauna stated, she does them with her kiddos. We do them all the time with our clients to make sure that they're staying safe. COVID was really interesting. We had to get creative with some of our safety planning. Thankfully, we're kind of almost on the tail end. Oh, I'm not going to say anything, knock on wood. So, you know, we've had to get kind of creative the past year and a half with our safety planning, but, you know, it's basically, you know, keeping it in the front of your mind or the back of your mind, how are we going to stay physically safe and how are we going to stay mentally safe?
Thank you. I think that's all really important information. Olivia, you talked a little bit about the legal system. Have you ever had to go to court with anybody in your role? Is that part of something that you do?
Yeah, it's a huge part of what I do. They know me by last name at the courthouse. So they greet me upon entering, which is fun sometimes. It's a huge part of what I do. There's a full-time legal advocate that works here. She will also go to court with individuals. Lexi will also go to court with individuals. It's kind of at the request. Most of the time, that's for things like divorce hearings or restraining orders. Those are processes heard on the civil end of the court. And then we also do criminal court accompaniment. So if someone does become a legal victim of a crime, meaning a person was arrested and then charged for that crime that they committed against like our client, that legal victim has the right to be at those hearings and has certain rights within the hearing itself. And so we statutorily are allowed to be at those hearings and provide support because it's a pretty intimidating thing. You know, we have all watched documentaries or series, you know, that portray the legal system. But I would argue that that's maybe not the most accurate portrayal of that system, and courtrooms are intimidating, you know, when you haven't done anything wrong. You know, they're just scary places. So it's a lot of what I do within Green Lake and Winnebago County.
Do you have do you have a place for like volunteers, or are you allowing people to do anything like that within your organization?
Yeah, we definitely have volunteers that assist in our organization, and they play a very large role. We have a variety of different opportunities that they can assist with, whether that's crisis support for like the advocates who are working in our crisis desk area with, you know, the phones, the cameras, scheduling appointments, with any sort of donations or donors that are coming in. I mean, there's a lot happening in that area. So we have volunteers that assist with that. We have volunteers that assist with the children's program. So when the adults go to support groups, children will go to our children's program, and that's run by volunteers. So their role is to just be a fun and safe and supportive person for the kids that are going to that group. We have volunteers that assist with our special events that go to, I'm missing areas and having a large brain fart right now, but donations, special events. Then we also have volunteers that assist with putting away donations and helping us stay as organized as possible. So right now, that there is a position that we are hiring for, and that is the position that manages all of our volunteers. So volunteering is like very slightly on hold, but for any new volunteers that are looking to volunteer with our organization, but hopefully that role will be filled sooner rather than later.
So for all of our students that are in the meeting here, if they are thinking about wanting to go into the advocacy role or do some of the things that you all do, what would your advice be for them?
So as a graduate of UW-Oshkosh in the Human Services Leadership Program, I had the amazing opportunity to do several internships throughout my time as a student. My last internship was in a shelter setting. Someone early on in my educational journey kind of said to me, like, pick one of your big internships, pick a place that you like could see yourself working, because it's a good trial run. Like, if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, at least, you know, then you know that. So that's kind of what I did with my internships. My last one, I like I said, was at a shelter setting. My first one was in a position that I never really saw myself working in, and I used that to rule in and rule out if I was right or wrong. So that's what I would say. I would say, you know, expose yourself if you can to opportunities that are similar to what you're thinking you want to do, because you might find out, like me, that you were right all along.
I definitely agree with that. You know, specifically like agencies such as ours, there's, you know, maybe half the amount of agencies in the state of Wisconsin than there are counties. Most agencies cover at least 2 different counties within the state of Wisconsin, if not more. So, you know, I would say that, you know, getting into advocacy is pretty competitive, just because there is limited resource or limited agencies, at least in the state of Wisconsin. So, you know, getting in somewhere, I volunteered at Harbor House, and I was also working here at the time part-time. And I just kind of made it known that, hey, I want to work here, and I kind of really fought for that position. So that's kind of, that would be my advice is, you know, making yourself known, educating yourself as much as possible, being the, you know, I'll do that. You know, you have to, I started from the bottom here and, you know, made it to where I am today. Not saying that, you know, I'm done, but, you know, really educating yourself on whatever field it is and volunteering or starting even part-time somewhere so that you can maybe eventually move up. You know, that's what I had to do. So, you know, and I can only imagine that's probably pretty similar at other agencies that are similar to ours.
Also know that you can reach out to us and ask us these questions. Like you could call us. I had the privilege of when I was a teen, I met with the teen advocate from Christine Ann to just ask, like, can you tell me about your job a little bit? Because I think it seems cool, and landed where I landed. So I'm really grateful to have had that opportunity where she could answer some of the questions, because advocacy is like a gray space and seems kind of vague sometimes, a little subjective, like hard to know what do you do. So if anybody has specific questions about any of that and is interested in advocacy role, please reach out to us. We would love to connect.
I think it's also important to note too that there are so many different opportunities and jobs within the social services or human services jobs, right? Like Olivia and I have the same educational background, have very different jobs within the same organization. And so that's something that's really cool too, is that there are so many different opportunities available within organizations that you can still be an advocate, just in a different capacity. So that's something too, is I know myself, and if I were in the role of any of these three, I'd probably be crying every day. And so I'm a sympathetic crier. And so if people are crying in front of me, I'm also crying with them. Not necessarily what you need in that role. So I have tremendous respect and huge respect for the three of them and all of the people who are in client facing roles. And I knew I wanted to be involved in a nonprofit and in an agency such as this, but not necessarily in that role. So it's important to know yourself and know your capacity of giving and exploring options as well, because there are options. So that's good to know as well.
And that's definitely a door that swings both ways, because I don't want a to-do list nearly as long as Alicia's. So, and I don't want to have the microphone nearly as often as she does. So know yourself. That's the takeaway.
And I'm not here to work with kids. So thank you, Shauna, for what you do.
Thank you so much, you all, for sharing. We only have a few minutes left, so I just want to first say that Dr. Johnson has put the End Abuse Wisconsin website, the link to their job postings, if anybody's interested in looking at that. But I just want to ask again if anybody in our audience has any questions for our guest here today. All right, well, I guess we will end our session today. And again, thank you, everyone, for coming. And I am just so grateful that you all were here to educate and share your personal experiences with us here today. So thank you. And for everyone else too, stay tuned. We still have a few more Ask an Advocate sessions to go. So you can join us next Monday at the same time. Thank you.